to welcome Coach Cosgriff as our speaker today for the Golden Valley Rotary. The floor is yours, Coach.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm humbled and honored that Betsy asked me to speak to this wonderful group. Honestly, the first time I heard of the Rotaries was during graduation this year. One of our players, Temi Bazizevich, received the Rotary Scholarship, and that went to just an amazing young lady. I have a wonderful family, and I did a little bit more research on what a great organization the Rotary is, and so thank you very much for having me. Um, as Michelle said, my name is Brian Cosgriff. I kind of consider myself the Golden Valley kid. Um, I was born and raised in Golden Valley. When you talk about Brookview and lawn bowling and all that, I worked there in the summer. So um, I actually lived 2 blocks from where I grew up. Um, and I just feel like Golden Valley is my home. It will always be my home. I attended Golden Valley High School, and Golden Valley High School was right on Glenwood Avenue in Ottawa. It's now Breck. And it was, I like to tell people it was Breck, but only a public school at the time. And essentially, Golden Valley High School went from Theodorworth Parkway to Winnetka and Duluth to like Cedar Lake Road. It was a very small school, and there aren't any schools like that anymore. Maybe Brooklyn Center and St. Anthony, about the only two that come to mind. And when you went to Golden Valley, it was like its own little culture. It was. I had 120 kids in my graduating class, and you could essentially do whatever activity or sport that you liked. I played 3 sports in high school, and I wrote couple articles for the paper, and it was on yearbook and all those kinds of things, because we were afforded those opportunities, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful education. I tell people if they had open enrollment back then, Golden Valley would probably still be open, because I went to Meadowbrook Elementary as well, and that's probably now one of the biggest elementary schools in Hopkins because of all the open enrollment students that go there and the great teachers. And I mean, Hopkins is a pretty good school district, so we get quite a few open enrollees that come through the pipeline. But anyways, Golden Valley was an amazing school, and I loved everything about it. When we first got our license, you would cruise from like Theodorworth Parkway to Lions Park, and then you turn around and you'd cruise all up and down. And I remember one time we found the keys to the football field at Golden Valley, and we turned the lights on, and we were down there playing football, and all of a sudden about 3 or 4 cop cars come down and bust us because we were so stupid to turn the lights on on Saturday night playing football, So that was one of the experiences that I had. And then I played Little League Baseball. That was right at Breck, and there was a baseball field that was by the Legion Hall. It was called Valley, and that was Little League. And we would register for T-ball and parkboard football at Brookview when it wasn't quite as nice as it was. So, but I had a great time going to Golden Valley, and I was really into athletics. I loved sports, but basketball was my favorite. And I guess the reason why basketball was my favorite is because my older brother played. And I remember watching him play in high school, and he was kind of Barry and he was our role model. We really looked up to him. And unfortunately, he passed away about 5 years ago. He had died from lung cancer. Very successful attorney and that sort of thing. But, he was our role model. So we played basketball. And he went away to college at the University of Minnesota. And his roommate was Flip Saunders. And he lived with Flip Saunders and Kevin McHale and Dave Winey and all these Gopher basketball players. Well, Flip's first coaching job was at Golden Valley Lutheran College, which was now the Perpich Center. All right. And because Flip was my brother's roommate, he was kind of my idol. He was this 6 foot, not real athletic guy, but he was tough. And that was the way I wanted to play. So I really wanted to play for Flip. And he recruited me very hard to go to Golden Valley Lutheran College at the time. And I was all set to go there. But then he got a bunch of players from like Milwaukee and out of state, and I looked at it and I just was like, God, I'll never get to play there. So I didn't know what I was going to do, because Golden Valley was my world, right? And so at the last minute, I decided to go to McAllister because my uncle, who was an attorney, had another attorney friend whose son was the coach at McAllister. Well, and looking back on all of this, and the reason why I'm talking about this is because the two things that I want to talk about are vision, goals, or three things: vision, goals, and having relationships. All right. And I've always wanted to be a gym teacher since fourth grade. I mean, I loved Phi Ed. I loved sports. I loved my teachers that I had. And that will come back into play in a few minutes here. But I've always wanted to be a gym teacher. Well, if you know anything about McAllister, it's a very liberal arts school. And at the time they had a Phi Ed minor, and you had to be a double major in other areas. You couldn't be just a Phi Ed major at McAllister. Well, McAllister at the time, they had a new coach, and was the athletic director was also the new coach, and he brought a bunch of us guys in. And I went there, and it was a very different. It was different than Golden Valley. Let me tell you, it was just very liberal, very different. Some of my friends were from all around the world. In fact, if you've ever seen the show Entourage, I don't know, it was on cable, HBO. The real Ari Gold I went to college with, and he was just like that character on the show Entourage. I mean, he was that obnoxious. And then Peter Berg, he's done movies, and he went to Mac with me. And then one of my college roommates was from New Jersey, and his name was Jack Gavin. And one of his best friends in high school was Tom Maypother. Now that name probably doesn't mean anything to you, but Tom Maypother is actually Tom Cruise. So you've got friends. The good thing about McAllister is I've got friends all around the country. But what I realized when I was at Golden Valley, I was a big fish in a small pond, because I was pretty good at everything I did at Golden Valley, but yet there wasn't that much competition. So I get over to McAllister, and he brought all of us in. I wasn't going to get to play a lot. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do academically. And you get to a certain point when you go to a small private school like that, you have to decide what your major is. And so I decided on geography and sociology. Well, what do you do with a geography and sociology major? I wanted to graduate in 4 years because that's where all your buddies were going. Plus, it was getting to be a point in time where Mac was getting expensive, and you can't just, mess around and decide you don't want to go to school anymore. You can take class. Anyways, I had to get out of there. So I called up one of my old baseball coaches, and this is where, the relationship piece comes into play, because I had this vision that I wanted to stay in education and coaching, but I didn't have the education for it. And I was essentially taking two majors just to graduate. And my friends were getting real jobs. So I called up Bob Lockwood, who was a math teacher at North Junior High, and he was coaching. He was my old high school baseball coach at Golden Valley. And he said, you know what, come on over to Hopkins, and why don't you get a job as a paraprofessional hall monitor, and you can do all sorts of coaching and that sort of thing. So I go over there, and I interviewed with Cliff Straka and Frank Rinaldi, and I was able to get a job as a paraprofessional hall monitor. And I loved it. I really loved it. I wasn't making any money, but I loved what I was doing. I was chaperoning dances, coaching girls softball, boys winter one basketball, girls basketball in the second season, and I was coaching football. And whatever they needed me to do, bus duty, whatever, I was doing it. And I made a decent living. Well, I loved it so much, I had to quit, messing around. I went back to school to St. Thomas and got my Phi Ed license and teaching license. And I drove down to Mankato every day for about 4 months and took classes down there to get my adapted Phi Ed license. And so I knew that eventually I was going to get this. It took me 2 years. And when I turned 24, I finally got my teaching license and applied for jobs from Eveleth to Marshall, Minnesota, and just couldn't get anything. And back then, Phi Ed jobs were really hard to get. And I remember walking around just going, you know what, these teachers, they don't realize how lucky they are to have jobs and how hard they were to get jobs at that time. Well, August was rolling around. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought maybe I'd have to go back as a paraprofessional again. And finally, Hopkins had an opening, and it was at Alice Smith for Phi-Ed. And this is right at the time where Hopkins was really growing. The elementaries were bursting at the seams, and I was able to get that job. And it was at Alice Smith, and I was going to co-teach with a guy by the name of George Perditis. And George was the king of organization. And the guy worked his tail off. I mean, he just worked his tail off. He was an amazing teacher. And his little baby was teaching dance. And I'm telling you, it takes me 3 or 4 beers to just even attempt to get out on the dance floor, right? And so he's teaching me how to do all this dancing. And I'm 23, 24 years old. And I'm really self-conscious. I'm clapping on 1 and 3, and they're supposed to be on 2 and 4 and all that sort of thing. I have no idea what I'm doing. I am like the epitome of the white guy on the dance floor who can't move. So we have this like month-long dance unit, and then it culminates with a dance night. And once again, I'm self-conscious as heck about this dance thing. And it seemed like all the mothers that were there were about my age, and it felt like they were all looking at me at that time. And it went off okay, but it's something that when George went over to Eisenhower, because they opened up Eisenhower Elementary, it's something I never did after that. And to this day, I mean, I retired from Hopkins, and I've got a teaching job now over at Providence. And I told him, I said, I'll teach anything you want except dance. I'm never teaching dance again. So that was kind of my thing. But anyways, I got this teaching job over at Smith. And at the time, I knew all about the Hopkins basketball tradition. I mean, they've had, Butsy Metzel, Kenny Novak Sr., and Tom Hutton, and now, Kenny Novak's the coach. And I knew all about Hopkins being this great basketball community. Well, I wanted to be a varsity coach. I had that vision that this is something I can do. So I went and got a job. My first coaching job was at Armstrong as a sophomore coach. And like I said, I was 24, probably years old, and was there for 3 years. And I don't know if we lost more than 3 games in 3 years when I was coaching over there. And I really didn't have a clue what I was doing. It was just that we had so much talent. But I thought I was Bobby Knight. I thought I can do this thing in my sleep, right? And I was very arrogant and cocky, and thought it was all about me that was doing this. And what later on you'll understand what this coaching thing is. It's not about the coach. But anyways, had a great experience working with Larry William. And then one Saturday I was working at a basketball kind of clinic with a guy by the name of Bob Cates. And Bob Cates used to be the head basketball coach at Breck High School. And Breck had just moved into Golden Valley at the time. And he introduced me to their athletic director named Joe Kordowski. Joe Kordowski was a former baseball player at the University of Minnesota, and he was at Breck, and he was just this great guy. One of these guys that when you meet him, he shakes your hand, and he's just like, he pulls you in, and he's just the nicest guy. And I'm like, I would love to coach for this guy. Well, he hired me to be their head boys basketball coach. And this is probably when I'm 25, 26 now. And I'm running my own program. And what I realized that when you go into the building that you love so much, but it's different. Breck was just a different mentality than was Golden Valley. The Breck mentality over there was, you know what? These are extracurricular activities. Very much academic oriented. We're going to, if we do well, great. If we don't, that's okay too. It's all part of the Breck experience, the Breck culture. And I had good kids, but it wasn't where I was in terms of a philosophy. Not that I was right. I don't know that I was right looking back on it now, but at the time I was all about really wanting to establish and create a program and create a culture of winning and that sort of thing. I was there for 3 years, and we had decent teams and we had good kids, but it wasn't what I expected. Going back to my old high school at the time, I thought it'd be more like Golden Valley, and it wasn't. And at the time, I was still teaching in Hopkins at Alice Smith. Now, mind you, I was at Alice Smith from 86 until this summer. I had never left. I was there the entire time. It was a great job. But the Hopkins boys position, Tom Hutton had just resigned, and I wanted to apply for that position, be the Hopkins boys basketball coach. After all, Novak Sr. and Butsy Metzold and all these great coaches coached there, and Hopkins was seen as a basketball community. Well, then Kenny Novak Jr., who played at Hopkins, he was at Blaine at the time. And when he applied for it, I knew he was getting the job. I mean, it was, you're either going to be Metzold or Novak or Hutton that was getting the coaching job. He had gotten the boys' job, and he left Blaine. He was extremely successful at Blaine. I mean, he was, I don't think he won a title, but he was in the state tournament a number of years there. And so he got the job, and his assistant, John Hedstrom, who's a Hopkins grad at Blaine, got the boys' head job at Blaine. So he had an opening for a JV position. And at the time, his dad was the sophomore coach, and he asked me if I'd come over. And I'm like, yeah, I jumped at the opportunity because it was in the same district I was teaching. Once again, I got to say, I mean, in my lifetime, I love Golden Valley High School, and Hopkins High School is right there with it. So anyways, I jumped at the opportunity. Now, when you coach with Kenny Novak Jr., you essentially sit there and learn. And that's what I did for 9 years. I knew I wanted to be a head coach. I knew I could be a good head coach. It wasn't going to happen at Breck because the mentality, the culture was different. You don't go to Breck and go to St. Cloud State. You just don't. I mean, it's the way it was at Breck. You're going to go to some elite private school or some school that's highly academic. But anyways, I knew I could do this. Even though it didn't go so well at Breck, I thought I could do this. Well, I knew that Kenny Novak, he was going to be there forever. He's still there. All right. And the girls' job opened up. And I loved Hopkins, and I had never really had any experience coaching girls. And at the time, the program was in transition. The previous head coach had taken a leave of absence, and the assistant was on an interim basis. And the assistant they had a decent year, and the assistant wanted to become take the interim label and be the head coach. And I had never coached, and I was coming from the boys program. And at the time, there was kind of, the two programs really didn't get along between the boys and the girls. For whatever reason, it just wasn't really jiving. And so the previous interim coach, he went for the job. He was named section coach of the year. And I came over from the boys' side. I'll never forget it. I went into that interview, and there were some parents on that interview team, and I could just tell that they weren't real enthralled with me. But for whatever reason, Ron Selno went on a limb, and he hired me to be the girls' basketball coach. And honestly, professionally, it's been the best thing that's ever happened to me. Being part of that program and creating that culture and working with those wonderful young ladies over all these years, it was truly a gift from God, to be honest with you. When I took it over, as Michelle said earlier, our first year, it was, I call it the honeymoon phase, because we really worked hard. I had a young lady by the name of Kate Maslowski who played for me. Kate and I would butt heads like nobody's business. I mean, it was fighting like cats and dogs. And she went on to go to the Naval Academy, and I don't know if she just retired but she was like, her rank is way up there. But her and I used to give her crap about it. I said, how the heck are you going to go to the Naval Academy? You can't take me telling you to do 5 push-ups. And to this day, I mean, we still joke about that, but she was amazing. All right. And we just had such a love-hate relationship at the time, but yet now the relationships were as tight as can be. She was kind of the leader of that team. We ended up losing to Armstrong, I believe, in the section semifinals, and we tied for the conference title, first time in history of Hopkins High School. And then the second season rolled around, and that was kind of the honeymoon phase was over, because I'll never forget, we had a meeting at the Lindbergh Center. It was kind of to get ready for the season. And I had never had any confrontations with any parents or anything like that. My first year was very easy. I didn't have any. That first meeting, after the meeting was done, I had a parent just literally screaming at me, and he blew up. He literally blew up and was screaming at me after the meeting about how we were going to do things. And then all of a sudden I was like, holy cow, this is what coaching's really like, because I never had any sort of parent things. But anyways, that year we ended up taking second. It's like the one year we didn't win the Lake Conference. We still had a great year. We had a young lady by the name of Leslie Knight who was coming through our program. Now, Leslie, she was probably the best leader and one of the most amazing people I've ever had a chance to work with in education. She was a coach on the floor. She rallied the troops. She had a smile on her face all the time. We still, she talked to me just about 2 weeks ago. She called me from Spain. She's playing pro ball over in Spain. Well, she kind of created the culture for us. And when I say this, it's about the relationships. It is, because when I was going through all this, I wanted to make sure that we were winning, right? And I wanted to be like Kenny Novak, where you're winning every time, you're going to win state championships. Well, in Leslie Knight's sophomore year, we finally get, and I believe, Regina, that may have been Tara's senior year, I think. But anyways, we got to the state tournament for the first time.
You're right, Cos.
Yep.
Senior year.
Yep.
Yep.
We got to the state tournament, Tara's senior year, Leslie's sophomore year. And I'll say this, and I was asked this just the other day, one of the best games I've ever been a part of, ever watched, ever, was we played for Elk River in the state champion or state tournament first round. And Lori was pregnant with Brooke, and the first round of the state tournament was at Monticello High School. Place was packed. And our team was a bunch of really hardworking, blue collar, we're going to bite you in the butt girls. They weren't the most athletic, but they worked their tails off. And Elk River was like the number one seed in the tournament. We got to play them in the first round. And we were down at half, and we came back to win that game. And it's probably one of the most gratifying wins I've ever been a part of. Now, we didn't win the state that year, but that was the group that originally created the culture that started our Hopkins Girls Basketball program, because they had a wonderful group of seniors. And then they threw in Leslie Knight on top of that, and Jordan Barnes. And we were able to, in 2 years, in 2004, we won our first state championship with Leslie Knight. Leslie Knight went on to become Miss Basketball. She went over to the University of Minnesota and became all Big Ten. For her first 2 years, she played 36 minutes in 2 years, but everyone was asking her if she was going to transfer and all that sort of thing. And that's just not in Leslie's DNA. She's just not going to do that. And so she stayed and had a great career over at the University of Minnesota. And then she went on to play pro ball in Spain. The next thing I want to talk about after that was 2004. And everybody, I'll never forget this. They thought, oh, the party's over for Hopkins. Leslie Knight's graduating. And what they didn't realize is we had some wonderful younger players in Abby Green and Jillian Shirley and Tiana Wilkinson. And the reason why I bring those people up is because they went on. Jillian Shirley is going to be an anesthesiologist. Abby Green went on to Rhode Island to graduate in 3 years. Tiana Wilkinson, who is probably one of the hardest workers and one of the least skilled players I've ever had, but yet did the most with her ability, as well as her life. Her mother passed away when Tiana was a freshman in college, and she's essentially raised herself by herself since then. She went on to play at Hamline University. She has 3 kids. She's very involved with Hopkins schools. She's just an amazing young lady, and she battled and battled. Well, we were in 2005, after Leslie graduated, we took second in the state. We lost to Kennedy in overtime. And then those kids' senior year in 2006, when everyone thought the party was over again, we won the state championship, beating that same Kennedy team by 17. And then 2007 rolled around, and we had created this culture, But there was a young lady who played at Minneapolis South by the name of Taylor Hill. And she was an amazing player. She ended up going to the WNBA, and we just couldn't beat Minneapolis South. And so for 3, 4 years, 5 years, I think, was it 5? I think it was 5 years. We didn't get back to the state tournament, but we had maybe 3, 4 losses every year. We just couldn't get past her. And then, there was a young lady who came through the program later on. Her name was Nia Coffey. Nia Coffey went on to become Miss Basketball. She went on to Northwestern University, became their all-time leading scorer and rebounder in the history of Northwestern. She was the 5th overall pick in WNBA. She won 3 state championships for us. Her father was Richard Coffey, who played for the University of Minnesota, the Golden Gophers. And her sister, Sydney, who flew under the radar, we called her the silent assassin because she was very humble, very, very, if you got her to say 2 words, that was a lot. I mean, she was very humble. Her brother Amir is now playing for the Clippers and recently just had 21 points. And so very much a basketball family. We won 3 state championships. And then 2014 rolled around and we were the number 1 seed. We got upset by Eden Prairie in the section semis. And from then on, from 14 on, we've been back to the state championship every year. Not just the state tournament, but every year. And what I want to say about that is this is about relationships. Because what I realized after winning, and this reminds me of Regina Terra, because we had such a great year in 2002. And after we had got to the state tournament, and then we lost, but I was sad. But yet I was even more sad because this group of seniors that Tara played with were amazing young ladies, and they were leaving. In 2004, when Leslie Knight was leaving and we won the state championship, you were happy as heck, but it was almost a relief. But then you were sad because these group of kids were leaving, and you don't know if you can ever replace that vibe, that chemistry. Do they have the vision? That sort of thing. And the thing that I can tell you in life, and more than anything else, you got to have vision, you got to have goals, but you got to have these relationships. You have to, because what I've realized is it's not what you know. It's about the journey you travel with people. It's about who you know, the experience you create with people. Some of the best years we've ever had as coaches came in some years where we struggled, but yet we had a great group of kids and wonderful parents to work with. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. For me, I decided to get out this year because of relationships. My principal that I work with, Jody D. St. Hubert, who's just an amazing lady, she decided to take a job as the director of teaching and learning at Edina. And then one of the things that my baseball coach told me when I was getting into education, he said, wherever you go, you're going to love it. You're just going to love it. He said, develop those great relationships with kids, but then the next person you got to develop a relationship with is the custodian. The custodian is going to get you the keys to the building. All right. He's going to get you access to anything you need or whatever you need. He's going to fix stuff if you need fixed. Well, at Alice Smith, the custodian was in my wedding. Dane Stablo, he was there as long as I left. Well, he just left this year, right? And I just didn't have it in me to break in another principal, break in another custodian, and then COVID came around. And I was like, this is, at this point in time, I don't know if I can do this again. Well, and the story behind Providence, I went to scout a game this year. And this is where higher power comes into play, because I was at a game this year and I was always thinking about retirement jobs. That's why I'm at Brookview, actually, because of a retirement job, I'm thinking. So anyways, I go to Providence and I'm there and I see these guys in these blue sport coats, gray pants, tie. They look sharp as heck. And they're just standing around. And I find out that they're the security guards at Providence, right? And I'm going, that could be a great retirement gig. I could stand around, look good in a sport coat, tie, against a private school where they don't raise any problems, right? I could do that job. So I asked about it, and they said, "Oh, those are all ex-cops. You're not getting one of those." But this lady who I knew, she said, "Well, if they ever have a fire job, we'll call you." So I was sitting in the par 3 shack at Brookview when all this stuff about retirement was going through my head, and Jody was leaving and Dane was leaving. They called me. They got an opening. I apply. I get the job, and I just think God works in mysterious ways, and that's how I end up at Providence. Well, their schedule goes till 4 o'clock, and that wasn't going to jive with basketball. So I decided, you know what, now is as good as time. Let's make the move. I'm nervous as heck about it. I've got to go to new teacher training. I've been teaching for 34 years, but now tomorrow I got to go to new teacher training, and we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, it's been about the relationships, because I wouldn't have found out about Providence if I didn't have a relationship with one of the families that was over there. I wouldn't have got the teaching job at Hopkins if I didn't have a relationship with my former coaches. All right. The thing that I am most happy about in all these years of coaching was the relationship that I had with the players. All right. It wasn't about the championships. It was about the relationships and about being there for kids. At the end of the day, that's what this is all about. And, essentially that's all I've got. I'm so honored that you asked me to come speak. I have never spoken to a group that wasn't affiliated with something that had to do with basketball. So thank you for this opportunity. We can open it up for questions or anything. So.
Thank you, Coach. When you say that's all I have to give, I'm thinking, that's huge. That's tremendous. Thank you for sharing your, probably just a sampling of stories.
Yeah.
What questions do we have, group? Let's see.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to unmute you.
Yep.
You're breaking up a little bit. You're on.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Hey, Coach. Just a quick side note. Mr. Perditis was my gym teacher in 4th grade, because I was in the first 4th grade at Eisenhower.
Okay. Yes.
And so you probably would have been my 3rd grade. I did have 3rd grade at Alice Smith, so I think you probably were my 3rd grade gym teacher.
Wow.
Very possibly.
That's how old I am.
But you were a young pup.
Yeah, I was.
It was early days.
Yeah, but I will tell you, Betsy would hand out the medals at the state championship, and it always, whenever I saw you there, because I was nervous as heck, and I'd see you there, it always brought me down a peg. It just made me relax a little bit. So I think
brought you down a peg. Oh, and that was such a thrill to be able to be on the state high school league board, to be at the championships. I mean, we had to remain neutral. But if you look back, I'm always wearing a royal blue dress underneath my my state high school league blazer, because I was rah Hopkins all the way. And the years that I was able to do the basketball tournaments, my colleagues were always kind in letting me do every single medal for every single Hopkins player and coach. And yeah, that was the closest I got to any sort of fame, was being in that moment. So thank you for that thrill. We actually have footage of, because those are late nights. So there's Saturday nights, either at Target Center or at Williams Arena. It's a late evening by the time the championship game ends. And at that point I had our first kid. And we have footage of him being at my parents' house watching the championship on TV. And every time I'm giving a medal, you can see the back of my head, essentially.
Right.
And he's like, "Mama, Mama." So that's pretty fun. Pretty fun. Hey, I wanted to ask you. I mean, clearly this was a bizarre end of your season,
Mm-hmm.
and a strange one to know that now it's the last season at Hopkins. What were some of the conversations like that you had with your players, not only at the time that you guys were a game away from winning? I know you were going to win, but also as you knew that you were going to be leaving. What were some of those conversations like?
Well, basically, I said to them, "You guys got to understand something. Whether we would have played this game or not, I'm convinced we would have won. but we got to play 31 games together, and we were truly a family. I mean, we were. It was unfortunate that didn't happen. We were upset at the time because at the time they were going to allow 200 people to go, and then they cancel it, but then they send us back to school where there's 2,000 students, so it didn't make a lot of sense to us. So we were upset about it at the time, but yet when you look back on it, you go, I understand why they did it now. I feel terrible for the track team, the baseball, softball, all the spring sports, because they didn't even get a season. Nothing would be worse than working all off season, fundraising, and then you don't even get a season. I was a little bit bummed out from the standpoint. My daughter was a senior. She wasn't a starter or anything like that, but I was really looking forward to coaching her one more game, along with the other seniors and Temi Bazizevich and Paige and KK and all the great kids that we had. I mean, that's kind of, you get bummed out about that, but looking back on it, we got 31 games and it was a great year. And we won 62 in a row, and all those kids were a part of the journey. And so, you want to approach this with a glass half full attitude. So
31 is nothing to
Coach,
see, if you ask me. Impressive. Go
Coach,
ahead.
this is Edward here. I want to compliment you on, I think, was a very nurturing way in which you talked to your team about the season ending. I'm sure that was helpful to them. My question involves financing of athletics and the gender disparity that's existed over a long time in this country. And that is that boys' athletics, whether it's high school or college, have always gotten a disproportionate amount of funding. And my understanding is that Iowa has actually been the leader in the country in terms of Title IX women's athletics. But I'm just wondering if, in terms of your experience over the many years, you could share with us any experiences you had with respect to funding for girls basketball vis-a-vis boys basketball.
Well, I never experienced any funding discrepancies because we always went out and worked for everything we got. I mean, we were going to work tournaments, we were going to sell stuff, we did whatever it took to raise the money. All right, the district gives us 4 coaches in basketballs and transportation. That's about it. We tried to raise between $15,000 and $20,000 every year. What I was upset about more than anything else is the brand of basketball that we were playing was very exciting, was very athletic, and yet we were doing really well, and we would draw half the crowd that the boys would draw. We had great teams, we had wonderful players, and then the gym would be half empty, and I'd go to a boys game, and they'd be blowing people out, and it would be boring because they were killing everybody, and the place was full. I'll never forget, we would do double headers 2 years ago, and the boys would play first, and then it would be packed, and then people would leave, and we would be playing the next game. And that would bother me that would bother me more than the funding, because funding is what you make of it. You want to go out and raise as much money as you possibly can because that affords you all the niceties for the girls, but yet it bothered me in terms of the support. And it still bothers me. I always tell people, go to a Lynx game. You're going to love. That's a great basketball team you get to watch, and especially when they had Lindsay Whalen and all those players. I remember going to watch the World Championship game over at Williams Arena. Walked up and bought a ticket for $20. You couldn't do that for the Timberwolves. I mean, you couldn't. And I'm watching the best women's basketball players in the world right here for $20. And we had the best player in the country, in the world, for her age level, in Paige Beckers, and yet people would leave. And I'm like, you got to come watch this young lady play. She was amazing. So,
thank you.
I have a question, Coach. It's Regina. So, you're going to be teaching at Providence. Are you going to be coaching basketball there too?
Nope, I'm not coaching another day in my life. I'm done. I'm just done. I'm on the chain crew for the Gophers, and I'm on the chain crew for Hopkins High School. I love football, and I'm going to announce Hopkins baseball. But no, when I told the kids this year, and it was a really tough conversation, I said, you know what, I'm not resigning. I'm retiring. I'm not coaching another day in my life. I've had my fair share of it. For me, the coaching got to be where you didn't really enjoy the wins as much. You just feared losing so much. And so the bar was set so high that it wasn't really enjoyable anymore. And you were losing focus on the relationships and keeping the culture. So.
Well, I for one wanted to thank you for all those years.
Oh, thank you.
Great job. Great job. Great program.
Oh, I'm telling you, you were part of the,
Screaming bunch.
culture.
Yes, I was a screaming maniac.
Exactly.
Any other questions? Well, this has been a tremendous opportunity to learn not only about you, Coach, but about the community and how interconnected we are. And I think it's great that you were Betsy's 3rd grade gym teacher. What a kick that is. Such a small world.
I had the Tom Selleck 70s porn star mustache.
Gotta have the mustache. Oh, very grateful for your time today and for your sharing. We're not a basketball organization, but we're very impressed with all that you had to share. And you're welcome to come back to attend our meetings anytime, virtually as well as in person, hopefully before too long at Brookview.
Thank you. You're going to love lawn bowling, by the way. That's a lot of fun over there.
Awesome. And now in closing, we are going to recite the 4-way test of the things that we think, say, and do as Rotarians. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the weather.
Thanks.
Have a nice day.